January 1980, Orange County, California. Rick Warren and his wife Kay arrived with $2,000, no members, and no building. Their first Bible study had 7 people in their living room. Nobody predicted what came next. Easter Sunday, that same year, Warren rented Laguna Hills High School Theater. 200 people showed up. No advertising, no reputation, just word of mouth. The church had no permanent home, but it was already outgrowing spaces. Over the next 35 years, Saddleback would use 80 different facilities, schools, warehouses, community centers, each one bigger than the last. By 1995, the congregation hit 10,000 members. Warren wasn't just building a church anymore. He was creating a blueprint. That year, he published The Purpose-Driven Church. The book spread like wildfire, 30 languages, hundreds of thousands of copies. Pastors worldwide started copying the Saddleback model, but Warren wasn't satisfied with just building a church. He wanted to change how people understood their entire existence. The early 2000s saw Saddleback averaging 20,000 weekly attendees. It ranked among America's 10 largest churches. The numbers were staggering. 82 different ministries, 200 small group programs, 300 community outreach initiatives. Warren had built a spiritual corporation. Then came 2002, The Purpose-Driven Life. What on earth am I here for? The book asked one question and promised to answer it in 40 days. 6 years later, it had sold 25 million copies. By 2023, that number exceeded 50 million. Only the Bible sold more copies among Christian books. 30,000 churches joined Warren's 40 Days of Purpose campaign. The Purpose-Driven Network reached 160 countries. Warren claimed he'd trained 400,000 church leaders. Harvard Business School taught case studies on his methods. The influence brought exposure, and exposure brought something he never expected. 2008. Warren hosted Barack Obama and John McCain at Saddleback for a presidential forum. The event drew 40 million viewers. Both candidates answered questions about faith, abortion, and marriage. Warren had become America's unofficial Protestant pope. January 20th, 2009. Warren stood at the Capitol, delivering the invocation at Obama's inauguration. The selection was controversial. Conservative evangelicals felt betrayed. Liberal activists protested. Warren was too conservative for progressives, yet too progressive for conservatives. He was walking a tightrope. Christianity Today named him America's most influential pastor. Forbes listed him among the world's most powerful celebrities. The purpose-driven brand was worth hundreds of millions. Warren could have built an empire. Instead, he gave it away. Warren reverse-tithed, living on 10% and donating 90%. He paid back 23 years of salary to Saddleback. He drove a 10-year-old Ford. Success had built something massive. But massive things have weak points, and Warren's was about to crack in ways nobody could have predicted. April 5th, 2013. The day that changed everything. Rick Warren's youngest son, Matthew, died by suicide. He was 27 years old. The news shocked the evangelical world. How could the man who wrote about purpose lose his son to despair? Matthew had struggled since childhood. Mental illness that started early. Depression so severe that medication barely helped. The best doctors money could buy. At the most prestigious treatment centers. Prayer chains that circled the globe. Nothing worked. Warren sent an email to his congregation the next morning. He described 27 years of watching his son suffer. The darkest detail. Matthew had asked years earlier why he couldn't just die and end the pain. He knew he'd go to heaven. Why not go now? The public saw Rick Warren, best-selling author. They never saw the father whose son couldn't get out of bed. They never saw the 3 a.m. emergency room visits, the suicide attempts that almost succeeded, the medications that stopped working. Warren didn't preach for 4 months. When he returned, he was different. 10,000 people had written condolence letters. But Warren noticed something. Many admitted their own struggles with mental illness. Church members who'd hidden depression for decades. Pastors who'd considered suicide. Christians afraid to admit their brains weren't working right. The man who taught millions to find purpose couldn't save his own son. That failure transformed him. Warren launched a mental health ministry at Saddleback. He partnered with Catholic organizations, unusual for a Southern Baptist. He spoke at psychiatric conferences. He told congregations that taking medication for mental illness was no different than taking insulin for diabetes. If my heart doesn't work and I take a pill, nobody judges me, Warren said at a conference. But if my brain doesn't work and I take a pill, I'm supposed to be ashamed. The tragedy had cracked Warren's image. The perfect pastor with the perfect family and perfect theology was gone. What emerged was someone more honest, more vulnerable, and increasingly willing to challenge the institutions that had shaped him. Grief does that. It strips away what you thought mattered. It reveals what actually does. Warren later said he didn't just grieve Matthew's death, he grieved his life. 27 years of watching his child ask why he couldn't be normal. 27 years of prayers that seemed to go unanswered. Warren was rebuilding, new priorities, new partnerships, new perspectives on suffering. But while he focused on healing, another crisis was brewing, one that would cost him everything he'd built. Mother's Day weekend, 2021, Warren made a decision that would end his 42-year relationship with the Southern Baptist Convention. 3 women walked onto Saddleback's stage. Warren laid hands on them, prayed over them, and ordained them as pastors. The ceremony lasted 20 minutes. As the consequences would last forever, the Southern Baptist Convention's reaction was immediate. Their governing document, the Baptist Faith and Message, explicitly states, "The office of pastor is limited to men as qualified by Scripture. No exceptions, no debate, no gray area." Warren knew the rules. He was 4th-generation Southern Baptist. His great-grandfather had been personally sent to America by Charles Spurgeon, the most famous Baptist preacher in history. Warren's DNA was Baptist. His theology degree was from a Baptist seminary. His entire network was Baptist. But he ordained those women anyway. "I'm tired of watching gifted women have their spiritual gifts wasted," Warren told a gathering of pastors. "Half our church is female, most of our volunteers are female, but they can't have the title pastor. That's not biblical. That's tradition." The timing wasn't random. Warren was retiring. September 2022, after 42 years, Rick Warren stepped down from Saddleback. He handed leadership to Andy Wood, a younger pastor from Echo Church in San Jose. Wood's selection made sense. Young, dynamic, growth-oriented, but Wood brought his wife, Stacy, and Stacy became a teaching pastor. That title, teaching pastor, triggered everything. The Southern Baptist Convention launched a formal inquiry. The Credentials Committee investigated. The Executive Committee deliberated. The verdict came February 21, 2023. Saddleback Church was not in friendly cooperation with the convention. Translation: they were out. Warren wasn't going down without a fight. He launched a full campaign. Dozens of tweets explaining his position. A dedicated website with theological arguments. 3 professionally produced videos. An open letter to every Southern Baptist church in America. A 4-page guide for convention messengers. His core argument was simple. Baptists believe in church autonomy. Each congregation governs itself. No hierarchy, no bishops, no pope. The convention existed to help churches cooperate, not to dictate their decisions. "I'm not asking you to agree with my church," Warren wrote. "I'm asking you to act like Southern Baptists. We don't kick out churches for interpreting Scripture differently. We never have." Warren was wrong about that last part. The SBC had expelled churches before for supporting slavery in the 1800s, for opposing civil rights in the 1960s, and more recently for accepting homosexuality, but never for ordaining women. Until now, Warren mobilized supporters. Big-name pastors defended him, moderate Baptists rallied, women's ministry leaders spoke out. The pressure was building toward a showdown in New Orleans. June 14, 2023. The Southern Baptist Convention annual meeting. 13,000 messengers, that's what Baptists call voting delegates, gathered in the convention center. Warren would get one final chance to speak. 10 minutes to save 42 years. June 14, 2023. New Orleans. 90 minutes that would determine everything. Warren stood before 13,000 Southern Baptist messengers. His last chance. He didn't plead, he didn't apologize, he challenged them. "Southern Baptists have always championed local church autonomy," he said into the microphone. "Are we changing that today? Are we becoming a creedal denomination that excludes churches over secondary issues?" The convention hall was silent. Then came the rebuttals. Albert Mohler, president of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, took the opposing microphone. "This is not a secondary issue. The office of pastor, reserved for men, is a matter of biblical authority. It's about whether we submit to Scripture or conform to culture." More speakers, more arguments. The rhetoric escalated. Warren's supporters emphasized freedom. His opponents emphasized faithfulness. Both claimed the Bible was on their side. Then came the vote. 13,000 messengers raised their ballots. The counting took less than an hour. The announcement took 30 seconds. 9,437 to uphold the expulsion. 1,212 to restore fellowship. 88% voted against Rick Warren. The second largest church in the Southern Baptist Convention was officially out. 42 years of partnership ended with a 4-digit number. Warren held a press conference an hour later. Reporters expected anger, maybe tears. Instead, Warren seemed almost relieved. "I wasn't surprised," he said. "I knew how this would go, but I wanted to force the conversation. The SBC has been avoiding this discussion for years." Then Warren made a prediction that sent shockwaves through evangelical media. The next generation of Southern Baptists will remove this restriction. Truth eventually triumphs over tradition. It just takes time. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Rick Warren, the man progressives called a fundamentalist for opposing same-sex marriage, was now too liberal for his own denomination. He'd been criticized by the left for being too conservative. Now the right said he'd gone soft. The evangelical center had shifted. Warren stood in the same spot he'd always stood, but the ground had moved under his feet. Saddleback didn't collapse. It still draws thousands every weekend. Multiple campuses in California, international locations in Hong Kong, Berlin, Buenos Aires, Manila. Andy and Stacy Wood still lead, still preach, still use the title pastor. They just do it without the Southern Baptist label. But something fundamental had changed. Warren was no longer a Southern Baptist hero. He was a cautionary tale. The man who built one of America's greatest church success stories had been formally rejected by the denomination he'd served his entire life. The financial scandals that destroyed other megachurch pastors never touched Warren. He gave away millions, lived modestly, practiced what he preached. This wasn't about money. It was about power, specifically who has it in a church. And the megachurch model Warren pioneered is facing a reckoning. Mars Hill collapsed after Mark Driscoll's exit. Willow Creek imploded following Bill Hybels' scandals. Hillsong fractured across 3 continents. These empires were built on charismatic founders. When the founder falls or leaves, the whole structure cracks. Gallup's data shows the bigger problem. American church attendance dropped from 42% in 2000 to 30% by 2023. Church membership fell below 50% for the first time in 80 years of tracking. The audience is shrinking. The model is breaking. Warren's 50 million books are still in print. His training materials still circulate to 400,000 pastors. Saddleback still fills seats every Sunday, but the denomination that shaped him said no. 9,437 to 1,212. The purpose-driven life asked one question: what on earth am I here for? Rick Warren spent 40 years answering that question for millions of people, teaching them to find meaning, build community, serve something bigger than themselves. Now, at the end of his ministry, that question has turned back on him. What happens when the institution you built decides your purpose and their purpose can't coexist? What happens when 4 decades of loyalty gets erased in 90 minutes? Some legacies get inherited, some get dismantled by the very people who were supposed to carry them forward. Warren believed truth triumphs over tradition. The Southern Baptist Convention believed they were defending truth against compromise. Both can't be right.